Hello everyone, and welcome to Danomics. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing how to use the Cutoffs Interpretation module. To navigate to the Cutoffs Interpretation module, come to the Central Module Selection drop-down menu and choose Cutoffs Interpretation. This will bring up the relative parameters and log display for this module. The primary objective within the Cutoffs Interpretation module is to flag intervals as gross reservoir, and net pay. This is done through entering in criteria in each of the parameter boxes on a zone-by-zone basis for gross res, and net pay. Let's look at an example of how to do this. Here I have my clay volume results track, and I can see that the curve name is VWCL. If I wish to discriminate as clay volume as a criteria for gross reservoir, I could type at VWCL less than or equal to 30%. This then changes what's flagged as gross reservoir to be only the intervals have less than 30% clay volume. Likewise, for net reservoir, I could change my criteria here to be at, and then I see my effective porosity here is called Phi-E, so I'm going to say at Phi-E greater than or equal to 5%, and I want this to meet the criteria for gross reservoir, so I'm going to say and at gross res. When I do this, I see it now updates my net reservoir to only reflect intervals that meet both the gross reservoir criteria and have more than 5% effective porosity. Finally, I'll do the same for my net pay. Here I'll say at SW less than or equal to 0.65 and meets my criteria for net reservoir, so at net res. And now we see that the net pay is updated. I can, of course, adjust these on a zone-by-zone basis. Let's take a look at the Niobrara Formation. This is an organic shell that is often fracked. Therefore, I may believe that I want to use a higher clay volume cutoff. In this case, let's say I want to use 40%. I can come here and just simply update this to be 40%. We see that I now flag a significantly larger portion of the interval. As this is an organic shell, we may also want to change the criteria for our porosity. And let's say we wanted to use a total porosity instead of an effective porosity. I can change this to Phi-T. And let's say I also want to change the value to only be 4%. Once again, we've now flagged a significantly larger portion of the interval. However, we can still see that only a small amount is flagged as net pay. Let's say we believe that our water saturation module was under-predicting hydrocarbons, and we wish to use additional information, such as just the actual measured resistivity of our formation. Let's say that we believed when our resistivity is greater than 10 ohms, the Niobrara Formation is actually going to flow hydrocarbons. We can update this as well. To do so, we'll need to combine some criteria. So we're going to say at SW less than or equal to 0.65, and we're going to use what's called the pipe operator, which is two vertical lines, to say or at resd final greater than 10 ohms, and, so double ampersand, it must still meet our criteria for net reservoir. Once we do this, we now see that we are flagging pay within the Niobrara based on either our water saturation or our resistivity profile. Often, it is desirable to try to minimize the number of small stringers that represent very few samples. To do this, we can use the minimum thickness criteria, and we can set a value here. This value is given in feet. So for example, if we put in a value of 3 feet, we can see that a few of the small stringers that were present disappear. We also have an option here for map partial zones. This applies to more than just our net pay flags, but to in general, how we will treat results when our data only covers part of a zone. And this is often the case in our uppermost and lowermost zones, but can be true across multiple zones when there are intermittent null values. If you have map partial zones turned off, even the presence of a single null value within a zone will result in it not being mapped in our summary maps. This is probably not desirable. In this case, use the map partial zones feature. But what about zones that only have a few available samples? We may not want those to be mapped either. In this case, we can use the limit by data completeness option, and we can specify the required curves that we would like to base this completeness on. For example, if I say data completeness of 0.75, and I specify the curves gamma ray final, res D final, inphi final, and rho B final, this means that 75% or more of the samples in that interval must have non-null values for the 4 selected curves. So in this case, when I look at the, if I were to look at the interval here above the Lewis, the summations would not be performed above this, as very little of the interval actually contains the requisite curves. The curves will still be calculated, it's just that the summary maps will be nulled out for that well. Okay, if you have any questions about how to use the cutoffs interpretation modules, whether that is how to set cutoff criteria or how to use the partial zones mapping and data completeness functionality, please feel free to reach out to us at support@danomics.com. Thank you.